Hello, this is Julio Arroyo, Director of Maintenance Operations and Safety for the Mill Valley School District. I'm here today with Sandrine Hitchcock. Sandrine's with AECOM, who's our program and construction managers for our Measure G bond program projects. Today, we're going to be talking about the Mill Valley Middle School. We want to give everyone an update of what we've done to date so far, where we're at in the environmental process, and really the rigorous process that we're going to really ensure that student and staff safety is at the forefront of what we are doing in this project, and we want to make sure that that's being shared with the community as well as staff so they can understand as well as what the process is and what the next steps are. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So the intent of the meeting, as I was saying, is to provide an overview of the proposed middle school modernization project, have an opportunity to give you some background on the design background so far and its current status, as well as the California Environmental Quality Act, the process and alternatives, and its focus on student staff safety, as well as the other processes we're going through, and giving an update on the project timeline and the next steps. Next slide, please. So I'm going to hand it off to Sandrine, who's going to go through the various different information about the project so far. And so thank you, Sandrine.
Thank you, Julio. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm just going to start by going back in time a little bit, going back to why we are doing the middle school project. As you recall, back in 2021, the district and the board approved a facility master plan. And essentially, what that facility master plan did was assess all the facilities, assess all the needs, and prioritized what the bond measure should include. So that list of priority was called Priority 1. That was the basis for Measure G, which, as you know, passed. It was 194 million. And the majority of the bond measure was around the middle school project, which is approximately 85% of the total amount. As we engaged, as the district engaged AECOM, then the architects and general contractors, lease-leaseback general contractors, the first step in the process before even starting any design was to gather information from staff from each department, administrative department, students, and that's what we call the steering committee. What came out of those meetings was a little above and beyond what the facility master plan was calling for. But what really remained, one of the big asks from everyone was what we call the pods, essentially having classrooms organized around collaboration areas. And we're going to show you a few renderings and plans of what that looks like. So also, aside from pods and gathering feedback from everyone, one of the analysis the architect did was look at single story versus two-story. What came out of the analysis is that, and in what everyone preferred, and the board provided direction towards the two-story concept or buildings would allow to free up a lot more space, outdoor space, not only for courtyard purpose, but also for future expansion as needed. So that was a direction from the board. Also, what the design team did is assess looked essentially at all the district properties. And that meant all the elementary schools, including the middle school site, and essentially just validate that the facility master plan gave the right direction, or if there were any other alternatives as far as sites. Came down to 2 sites because of size. So it was Etna and the middle school. and the preferred direction at the time was to proceed with what the facility master plan was calling, which is essentially rebuilding on the existing footprint. So just to recap, direction to date from the board has been a maximum of $130 million in construction cost for the middle school. We also are exploring a temporary campus at the existing site on the east side of the new middle school, as well as the current design is a two-story option, two main buildings, two-story. There is a small single-story building on the north side. And the design is based on a 950 student model. This is essentially the facility master plan did show demographics and enrollment data that would not exceed 850 and declining over time. The district is currently validating those numbers by doing another demographic study just to validate again those numbers. One of the things we're looking at, again, we're talking about the proposed project right here. We are still looking at other options. Essentially, the process for us to go through the process, we have to start with a project, a proposed project, and that allows us to compare it to other options. And we'll go over those alternatives in a little bit. But again, this is the proposed project, but it doesn't mean it would necessarily be the one the board elects to proceed with in the end. So I just want to show you what the architect has been working on over the last few months. Those are renderings that actually you can use the QR code at the top to look at a video they presented at a board meeting. But those are renderings and plans they have been presenting for the proposed project. So as far as configuration of the proposed new school, the main entrance would still be from Sycamore, roughly in the same location of where the library entrance is currently. But this is a view from that main entrance. The idea of the proposed design is to provide a single point of entry, and the site would be fenced, and that allows for safety and security purposes, obviously. The two-story buildings, you can see them on each side of the entrance. On the ground floor on the right would be the administration, which allows supervision of that single point of entry. Above that is would be one of the classroom wing, and on the left, singles on the ground floor and second floor also. This is a view from actually the second level of the classroom building, again, showing that collaboration area with classrooms all around, semi-enclosed spaces. Most of the views would be to the north. This is a view from the courtyard looking back at the entrance to the building. On the right, you can see that single building structure, which would be the art wing. On the right, a classroom wing on the first floor and second floor. On the left is the administration, and above a classroom wing. So this plan really shows those two wings, those two light blue rectangles represent the footprint of the proposed classroom, administration, and library building. On the north side would be a single-story art building, and essentially freeing up some area, showing here in dark blue, maybe future expansion, whether it's classrooms or other facilities for the site, but really freeing up the site, providing as much open space while planning for the future. One thing to note is that currently we are looking at leaving the PE portables on the north side, and as well, just like the facility master plan was recommending, the existing gym and portables on the north side would remain as is. One thing to note too, here at the bottom, Sycamore, it is intended to improve the drop-off and parking areas on the east side. We'll see it in the next slide, the interim housing, but essentially part of the site, and essentially all the buildings would be elevated. So these are plans of the classroom pods. We were just looking at renderings of, essentially showing that semi-enclosed collaboration area or learning deck with classrooms and teacher prep area around. So that would be typical of 3 floors. This is showing the ground floor plan of the administration. On the left would be the main entrance to the campus. And on the right would be the library looking north onto the courtyard. So this is a plan showing what we call the interim housing. Also, essentially, it's a temporary campus because the proposed project is the replacement of, or the demolition and reconstruction of the middle school on the existing footprint. That means that students would need to move to temporary classrooms while construction happens. This is the current proposed plan. It doesn't mean it's going to be the one that's exactly like that at the end, but this is showing on the east side some portable buildings to accommodate 7th and 8th grades. We're currently looking at having maybe 6th graders at Edna, but again, this is the general idea of the temporary housing. One thing to note is that, as mentioned previously, the existing gym and portables would remain through the entire project, but that allows also a good buffer, both visual and acoustic, from the construction zone. So, as Julio was mentioning earlier, we heard a lot of questions from the community, a lot of concerns, and we just want to address specifically some of them with you today. Um, we heard a lot of questions about why the existing site, why rebuilding at the existing middle school site. We heard questions about, is the site safe? And why are we not looking at other locations? And if we are, what are those alternatives? So we're going to cover that really in a little more detail. But these are the main questions we heard from the community, and we do care about those questions and are addressing them thoroughly. So we wanted to give you a little background on this. So because we're rebuilding, it's a pretty significant building. Because we're rebuilding the existing middle school, the district is required by law to do what is called the California Environmental Quality Act, and there are different paths. One of the paths the district has elected to take is called an environmental impact report. And what that report does, essentially looking at a proposed project and alternatives, comparing them, but specifically looking at the impact of that project, of those projects on the environmental. That also, it allows the district also to obviously look at options between those proposed projects and alternatives. It allows also the public to provide input and provide information. And also it allows to ultimately have an array of options that the district and the board ultimately can pick from, what makes the most sense for the district. I mentioned the public involvement. There are, during this process, 3 opportunities for the public to provide input or ask questions. The first one was actually done last in June, July. what we call a notice of preparation, essentially when we issued a public notice saying we are intending to write and issue an environmental impact report. The public had an opportunity to provide comments, as well as federal and state agencies and local agencies. The next opportunity for the public to provide input will be approximately in March of 2025, when the draft environmental impact report will be available. Law requires that we make this document available for 30 days. The district has actually elected to make it available for 45 to allow everybody to really have the time to review and provide comments. Once we receive all comments, we are required to incorporate those comments into the final document and address all of them. And that's the third time the public will have the opportunity to provide input. We're currently estimating this to happen around August of 2025. So we talked briefly about the proposed projects and other options. The idea of the EIR is to explore every options. We currently have 13 options that are being explored and studied and will be incorporated into the EIR. And I actually invite everybody to look at the last board meeting where there was a detailed list of all those options. But for the purpose of this presentation today, just wanted to give you the four categories generally where all those options fall under. CEQA requires us to look at a no project option. What would it mean if we didn't do anything? The other category, we looked, as I mentioned, at all the properties owned by the district. We looked at them both for the permanent campus, but also for the temporary campus if we had to relocate students. And then we also looked at non-district property, whether they could lease or purchase, and that's going to be part of the report. Again, recommending all of you to, if you're interested in knowing what those options are, to look at the last presentation from the board meeting. So aside from looking at options and the impact on the environment, we're also looking at the site itself. And part of the requirement of the CEQA process is also to look at the historical data of the site. What we know the site was a dump site. We have some data from the construction of the community center on the north side. We have some information about the existing site based on quarterly inspections the county is doing. But the county also is a lead agency in the sense that they monitor how the existing site has been maintained and if there are any issues. So it's one of the agencies, along with the Department of Toxic Substances Control, that we have to work with to ensure that long term, whether or not we're building, whether or not we're doing anything on the site, we need to ensure that the site is maintained and there are no issues. And as a matter of fact, as you know, the community center was also built on the dump, and they're going through the same process with the county, essentially monitoring. They have sensors. The county goes there on a quarterly basis and assesses if everything looks fine. So part of that process is what we call the PEA, the Preliminary Endangerment Assessment. And what that entails is essentially our team, Nino and Moore, put together a work plan. They essentially said, here's all the historical data we have. We know it was a dump. This is the actual data from the soil we have from all those other projects. This is what we're proposing to do. This is how we're going to do the work, how many borings we're going to do. I believe there's more than 200 borings. This is what we're going to test for. This is how we're going to collect the data, and this is how it will be presented, and this is what it's going to allow us to do. So that was the first step, which got approved by DTSC, that we call the work plan. And in November, there were notices issued for doing the sampling on site based on that approved work plan. The work was done actually during the night to minimize impact on anybody. And the county, as well as the DTSC, were present. And right now, all the samples are being tested. So we're expecting a result for the samples at the end of this month, and should get a preliminary report, a draft report by January. It is our intent to present that information to the public once it is available. And just a reminder, again, this is a public process. All documents are posted, can be viewed on the DTSC website or the county website. We have at the top the email or the website for DTSC. But again, you can go also on the county website and see the information available. All the results will be public. They will be posted on the DTSC website. I mentioned briefly the county and how, whether or not we're doing anything on the site, whether they have to essentially monitor and quarterly inspect the sites to make sure there are no issues. This is what is called post-closure land use. And that's a document essentially that's tied with our CEQA process that essentially says, based on all the findings, this is how long-term the site will be maintained and monitored. So one thing also, as we met with the parents at the elementary school, obviously we wanted to make sure everybody understands what the timeline is. We understand that the main question is my kid, gonna have to be at the interim housing when? So we wanted to provide a little more information about that. This is the CEQA PEA schedule. We're roughly in the middle of it, preparing what I mentioned earlier, the administrative draft environmental impact report. We will be issuing this in March for public review. And at the end of August, we anticipate at this point that that will be the completion of that process. Only then can the district proceed, well, first by selecting a project, whether it's the proposed project or not, or any other alternatives or combination. Only after this process is completed can the district proceed with a project and the construction of it. So this is essentially just showing the main milestones of the previous schedule. Want to just focus on the last row here, potential start of MVMS construction. We're right now showing October. So that would be, again, the earliest we could start to do planning and any activities for construction after the August 2025 approval of the EIR. It does not mean that construction would start in August, in October, sorry. It would just mean that a project would have been selected by the board and the district, and therefore the planning of that project would be moving forward. That was a lot of information, and we understand might be a little might take a little time to digest, but if you have any questions, would like some answers to any of those questions, please email the district. We will review all questions and provide answers. The email is communications@mvsschools.org. And thank you for listening.